Hi, I'm Brian Kellerman, co-founder and Chief Food Safety Officer at Kellerman Consulting, and you are watching our video series on corrective and preventive actions. And in this video, we are going to merge a pair of concepts, CAPA, or corrective and preventive actions, and key metrics, in order to help continue the development of the culture of food safety through quick and robust action in a case where a deviation or nonconformance occurs in operation that involves crucial activities. We introduced key metrics in our first video series, and you may want to watch to refresh your understanding of how key metrics should be set in order to better understand how CAPAs can involve key metrics. Going forward, the actions we have already taken in recording nonconformances, root cause analysis, corrective actions, and preventive actions are going to be elevated to essential functions under circumstances where they affect key metrics. This means quick action, full facility training and discussions, and strong corrective and preventive actions that are clearly visible each time operations runs following implementation. When we set key metrics for the facility, these are the fundamental actions we use to evaluate if our system is capable of achieving a successful outcome. Because of how important these criteria are to our operations, we need to separate out our corrective action and preventive action program when looking at how we address these. Where key metrics for operations have been clearly defined and are monitored sufficiently to know if you are in control of operations, any loss of control, deviation, nonconformance, error, or mishap should be immediately obvious. Examples of these types of key metrics where safety is the focus would be a key metric of no hormones in incoming raw milk for a dairy or proper cooking temperatures for a meat or poultry operation. In any of these examples, a failure means that the food is not fit to ship or sell without corrective actions such as reprocessing or disposal of product. In these examples, it is not good enough to just document the event and move on. These are events that require more robust action, and leadership needs to oversee those actions. Let's focus in on the example of incoming milk and review the correction, root cause, corrective, and preventive actions we can take here as part of adjusting a key metric. Raw milk is tested upon entrance to a dairy, and where claims of hormone-free are made, a test for hormones is the way to prove the absence of the hormones in the milk. If you are relying on assurances from the supplier, then you do not know for sure that fraud or error is not occurring in regards to the feeding or injecting of hormones into the animals. Where we have testing, a positive test for hormones is an invalidation of the label claim for hormone-free, so the milk cannot be packaged and sold as hormone-free. The correction here is clear. In the unlikely event that the test is taken before unloading the tanker, you can reject the raw milk and send it back to the supplier, and they can sell it to someone who isn't making a hormone-free claim. In the more likely scenario that the test occurs in a holding tank, the positive result probably means you are dumping the milk. That also means insurance claims or refusal to pay the supplier and adjusting logistics within operation to meet orders. But these are all corrections, not corrective actions. They only address actions at hand, and you have not started addressing potential future events. One other note for correction here is that in the case where fraud is the determined cause, you will need to call your State Department of Agriculture or the FDA to report the incident and assist in their investigation. With all of the issues identified in this nonconformance involving hormones in milk, the failure at the point of supply is going to be the focus of our corrective action and preventive action, because without future intervention, there is a very good chance the next tanker load, or the one after that, may have hormones as well. If a supplier has already demonstrated that they may send inappropriate milk, or where a purchaser has demonstrated that they may inadvertently purchase the wrong raw milk, you can continue to be at risk for repeated occurrences without effective corrective and preventive actions. The disruption to operations when tankers are rejected or where tanks are emptied because of contamination are likely to be catastrophic if it happens repeatedly. So you must follow through on all CAPA actions as though your company depends on it, because it does. In this example, a root cause analysis is not optional and it must be completed. If the use of a fishbone or 5 why exercise is helpful in completing the investigation, they should be used. Regardless of the investigation tool, you would need to contact the supplier and find out if they accept responsibility for the presence of hormones and what could have happened on their end for the hormones to be present. In some of these investigations, it may be the facility's fault, where hormone-free raw milk was not properly specified, or the suppliers may claim no responsibility or may present evidence that contradicts the positive hormone test, and anything like that needs to be investigated to some kind of conclusion. If investigation into the supplier leads to information that conclusively reveals the cause of why hormones are present, we can move to corrective action after completing the corrections. But if we can't figure out why it happened, there may not be an option for a corrective action, and we may be stuck with just the correction, which means we must have a preventive action to assure we won't have a repeat. So let's review what corrective action looks like in this situation. Again, to have a corrective action, you would need to be dealing with a situation where a root cause identifies the source of the issues, whether it is an employee or the supplier, and the responsible parties accept at least some responsibility for the presence of hormones. Here, a corrective action would be a future event or series of events that are added to the process to make sure the correction carries forward to the purchase of the next shipments of raw milk. Where it is a corrective action, it is going to apply directly to the supplier of the milk. You are going to have to review that supplier's approval status, and that will require review of supplied paperwork for approval. Also, an additional corrective action is going to involve that either the purchaser only purchases hormone-free milk, or the supplier is going to provide only hormone-free milk going forward. To achieve that, you are going to have to test the tanker prior to unloading, or more likely the supplier is going to have to get that test performed prior to shipment. To continue or close out the corrective action, the receiving team, the lab team, or QA are going to need to be made aware through training that a new action is being added and that each shipment from the supplier must include verification of test results prior to receiving the tanker load. This also means that the receiving procedure will need to be updated so that it is clearly written into the policy that reviewing of hormone testing is required. When you make that update, you may want to make a general statement that any hormone testing has to be reviewed, or it can say in the procedure that supplier X has to have hormone tests reviewed. Either is acceptable. As you can see, a corrective action for this scenario is a large amount of work and takes a significant amount of time. But we must follow through because the work and effort is surely less than the problems that would result from shrugging it off. As we finish up this example, we are going to add a definition of a preventive action in a case where we cannot get to the root cause clearly. In a situation where we can't say for sure that the purchaser ordered the wrong milk, or the supplier can show contradictory evidence that they did not supply milk with a hormone in it, a more broad action is potentially called for. A suitable preventive action would be to apply the corrective action requirements we identified for the single supplier to be applied to all suppliers going forward. At the level of preventive action, you would apply it to a class of suppliers or all raw milk suppliers, which means that the relationship with those suppliers is going to change. In this CAPA example, the difference between corrective action and preventive action is pretty narrow and it may be confusing. So let's look at a more clear-cut distinction involving a key metric. Let's switch to an example of a meal delivery service that cooks meals, packages hot, and then chills the cooked meals prior to frozen delivery. In this example, there are several critical control points and/or process preventive controls, and each of these points is a key operational step that must have key measurements. One of these is cooking, the second is hot filling of correct packaging, and the third is chilling quickly enough for safety. If a deviation occurs in chilling because you cannot chill fast enough, the difference between corrective action and preventive action will be more clear. First, we'll note that the correction may be recooking the incorrectly cooled product and cooling according to requirements. This is acceptable, otherwise the correction is throwing away the improperly cooled food. For a corrective action, you may place the cooked food in a different location in the freezer, or you may place that dish on ice in the freezer each time it is made to speed up the cooling process and to make sure all dishes are cooled effectively. In contrast to that corrective action, a preventive action would be the purchase and addition of a blast chiller to operations so that all dishes run through the blast chiller as opposed to being chilled in a freezer. By adding the blast chiller as a new process and applying the change to all dishes, we address the key metric in such a way to prevent the scenario from occurring. All of the actions we have looked at for corrections, root cause, corrective actions, and preventive actions potentially apply to all other non-conforming or loss of control events, but it may not be the best use of your time to perform as thorough an investigation for an unlocked door or a mop that was left on the ground. Additionally, those regularly occurring issues that were discussed in a previous video may not be resolved even when we apply all of the practices for CAPA. But at a minimum, for each nonconformance or loss of control event that involves critical aspects of your operation, you need to be prepared to follow all the steps in documenting the nonconformance, performing the root cause analysis, documenting the correction, documenting the corrective actions, and documenting the preventive actions that apply. All documentation must be signed and dated, and all of these should be presented in full to leadership and properly filed away to show to regulators, auditors, or customers upon request to review how you identified issues and corrected them. Thank you for watching. For more food safety training videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel.